doing. And that's something I'd ask you to really think about when you hear that encounter with someone that raises their voice, that yells a lot. Obviously, you're smart enough to know there's something else triggering that. But you can't be to the point that, well, it isn't me, because it might be you. It might be something that happened that you need to get into. If there was truthful, trusting, candid feedback along the way, there wouldn't be that element of surprise or that element of build up, build up, build up, and then pop the top and then scream and holler. So I would challenge you that you'll run into very destructive leaders or leaders that have a tendency to dwell on the destructive side because they're loud and they also may be intimidated. Now that's where you have to judge on your knowledge. You're coming in with a very, very high skill set out of this program. There's no question in my mind. I've got almost 1,000 Purdue engineers in this company. I'd love to have 2,000 Purdue engineers because I know they're better than most other university engineers from all the other universities that we go and recruit at. I've seen it, been there, done that, know that, and preach that back to my company. But you're going to run into some people that your skill set exceeds tremendously. And if they happen to be your leader for a period of time, there's an intimidation there in that they know full well your skill set may exceed theirs. And they can't let that happen to their own career, so you have to guard against that. That's the difference of where you get the, they're pretty arrogant or they're pretty cocky. You don't want that label, or else you're going to run into a spin cycle. You have the ability to work your way through that and use your skill set to your benefit, but also to the benefit of the enterprise, again, if you're the proper team member, the proper team leader, the proper project leader on providing everyone with, we're all going to do this as a team. But there will be some destructive in there, and it does exactly that. That relationship, if somebody is always loud, somebody's always vocal, somebody's always demeaning, that's not going to build a very strong relationship for any of you. And if it does, you probably need to look in the mirror and ask yourself, why does this make sense to me? There's a time for that, right? And you see a lot, if you watch the football game Sunday, you heard a lot of or Saturday, you heard a lot of the talk about how Brom was going after Plummer last week in his face, yelling and screaming, and what did he do this week? His parents gave him hell for the way he treated Plummer last weekend. So this weekend, you didn't see any of that on the sidelines or in the locker room. So there's an opportunity to make corrective behavior through some feedback that he received from his parents. Take it wherever you can get it. I know you're in that age where parents don't know anything. I have 2 kids that have already gone out, married, beyond college. But there is that period of parenthood where you know nothing. And some of your parents happen to be in that right now in your minds. They can provide some good feedback. So there was a corrective action that made a lot of sense. But last weekend, I'm sure Plummer would have thought, I don't need to listen to a coach yell at me for missing a pass. I don't need him to yell at me for a wrong play call. But that's what was happening. But you'll run into that as well. It's not going to improve performance. And then on the other side, trust and mutual respect, no matter where you're at in the organization, no matter what team you're leading, no matter how many players are on your team, you have to have respect for each other and you have to trust each other. But there comes that time that you need to provide feedback if somebody's not doing their job, if they're not carrying their weight on that particular project. So this is just more about, again, being hurt. If you're constantly being the destructive type of feedback, then the person you're trying to provide that to is just going to withdraw. You just can't take that. You don't need to take that, and you won't over time, right? Human nature says, I'm not going to put up with that on an ongoing basis. So you'll look for different options. And sometimes that option is very detrimental to the organization. Okay, so let's look at candid and constructive feedback. Right in the middle it says it's not easy. It's not, because you're all peers and you're going to try and give feedback to some of your peers. And that doesn't make you better than your peer, because you would ask your peer to provide feedback to you. In our business, at the executive level, we started several years ago 360 feedback. There's a lot of companies out there that do this as a business. It's not only important, you've heard about all the people that try and manage up, right? I know what my boss wants, I know what coffee he drinks, I know when he comes to work, all those things. But Sally and Johnny that work for me, I couldn't tell you what their last names are. That's not the way you want to be. That's not how most people are, but that happens when you get into that world of I'm just worried about my managing up ability. So in this case, you want to be able to provide that feedback all the way around. The 360 world is I'm going to have my peer group. I'm the director of paint operations. I'm going to have the body and white directors give me feedback on how I accept them. I'm their customer. They supply me with all of the metal. We seal it, we paint it, and then we get it off to General Assembly, and likewise for that group. So all three directors are peers in our organizations, so we ask for feedback from all of them. We ask for feedback from your two leaders. You always have a direct line and a dotted line leader in our business, and then in my case, I've got 300-ish leaders behind me that I ask for some of their feedback. So that's the 360 around the whole who you are and what you do, and have that feedback come in anonymously in most cases until you can build that trust that we just sit and discuss that. So in your world, the easiest thing I've seen, it's still old but it's still there, is SurveyMonkey, that you can quickly use on your teams to get 7, 8, 9 questions about how you are performing as a leader, and have all your project members respond to those basic questions and see. You got to be able to accept it. Remember, it's going to be a gift that they provide you. Some of them will tell you what you want to hear. Some of them won't trust the animosity of it. But if you use that, we've seen that works pretty well, pretty quick, right up till, I think up to 9 questions, it's free. So it doesn't hardship you financially. But we'll keep coming back to that. This is not the easiest thing to do. It's not, I mean, right, what's your hardest class? Thermo? No. Heat, mass transfer? I mean, you all have a different class that just might slap you side the head because you just don't care for it. A lot of people don't like giving feedback because it's not sometimes what you really want to do, because you can't be all kinder, gentler, and it can't be all great group hugs. You'll have time for all that, but you have to be able to be candid, and you have to be able to be honest about where you're at as a team. Okay, so giving the constructive criticism involves delivering it in a reasoned, professional manner that's designed to help you overcome a problem or an issue. Reasonable, professional. When you're providing feedback, if I'm providing feedback on your performance, I can't get involved in the fact that I hate purple. That has nothing to do with the situation or the problem you're trying to overcome. You just have to deal with that. That has nothing to do with performance. But again, you will find people that intertwine things because they just let that vent up. You know, every damn meeting she brings purple something, and that just bothers me. So that's a one-on-one, nothing to do with performance. But if it's affecting your thought process, then you need that feedback to say it's okay. Forget what is being worn. Forget the color that trips your trigger, or whatever you want to phrase that as. But it has to be useful. It has to be professional. The more professional you are, what I think most research will tell you is the better it's received. The more the people can trust you, that you've done your homework. And as I show you the quick 3-step process here, you'll see that if you're prepared, the recipient of your feedback is much more thankful that you have taken time to do what you need to do to provide that feedback. Smooth and effective resolution, because guess what? Your project team is your project team tomorrow, and you provide feedback tomorrow, and your project team is your project team next week. You can't just decide you're out and you're out because I don't like purple and I don't like that you don't do your homework. They're still your project team. So the more professional you are, the more you accept the fact that if we don't address those issues, the issues are still going to be there, and now I'm letting them build up, and I'm going to vent that out the wrong way if I have that propensity to pop off somewhere. So you're still working on the resolution of a problem. Purdue engineers resolve problems better than any other group of people in the world. That's my belief. I don't think there's data out there to verify that. I know from my time in GM, that's where you want to go. Nothing the fact that I have my bachelor's and master's in engineering from this great university. Nothing related to that at all. I can probably convince a lot of people it's a proven fact. But you do solve problems. You all know that. You solve problems regularly. Some complex, some pretty simple. But that whole problem solution methodology is what's important. Positive working environment, consideration of people's feelings and their contributions are what you're really trying to strive for. Just some basic things on what you want to consider. Is your feedback timely? All right, you don't want to wait till the end of the semester and say, you know, Bob, if you had addressed your problem after that first quiz, you wouldn't be in the problem you're in now. Right? Timely feedback is extremely important. You don't want it to just continue to have this time period in between where you can't even recall what was there. Some people take copious notes. They have mental ability to remember a lot. Others don't. There's this thing called aging. Trust me, you'll be there. That sometimes you find yourself having to write down or log in a few more things than you really did in your early time because your brain wasn't filled with a lot of useless information, I'll say. So just think about who you're working for, who's giving you that feedback on making sure that there was an opportunity to provide it that was indeed timely. Again, attitude goes into that professional part of it as well. If your attitude is that I really want to help you, rather than I just got to get this off my list, and I'm only worried about me, then your attitude is going to show through there. If you're not professional and you end up yelling and screaming, then there's going to be less receptance of that feedback. Again, some common knowledge, some common sense, but you got to think about that because a lot of times when you're up against the deadline and somebody hasn't performed and you haven't had the opportunity to discuss their performance with them, then you very well may, on the risk of you're going to drop from a B to a D on this, that's a tough pill to swallow, and you're going to let that out. And that's not going to be constructive. So your attitude is very important. That's the venting the frustration or trying to punish somebody because you're the leader and you think you've been given that right or that responsibility that you can do that. And then reverse the role. Consider the feelings that you're going to hit when you're providing feedback. You want it, you want the feedback, you know you're going to be better because of it. Make sure that you have that same view when you're providing that feedback. Okay, a basic three-step process. How do you provide feedback? You have a situation, you're in the middle of the curve, you're at the end of the curve, you want to move the group, the enterprise, to the right on your normal distribution. Three things: prepare, review, and provide. If I'm not prepared, the recipient's going to see right through that, if they care. You assume that they care. They're going to see the fact that you took no time to prepare your explanation or to prepare how you're going to provide this feedback. So prepare by observing your behavior. What's different? What's the key in that phrase? Look at each word. Observe. What does that eliminate? Hearsay, right? I'm not going to take Joanne's word that Jennifer wasn't doing the job. I have to observe that. If I'm going to be the person providing the feedback, now I'll deal with why Joanne wants to explain that rather than deal with the feedback directly on a different set of feedback circumstances. But hearsay isn't going to win your recipient of the feedback over as much as I saw what you were doing. On this date, I observed this. On this date, I recorded this. Let's discuss those and see how we can turn that into something more positive or more constructive. So that eliminates a lot of the hearsay, he said, she said, sort of dealings. So the second part, review it, is make sure that you're not just responding to the fact that you hate purple. That there is some item, some set of circumstances that you can deal with, and not just a feeling that ticks you off or something that upsets you. You want to make sure that you're not being subjective, that you have objective evidence that you're going to portray. And that, again, comes back to your observations will lead to that. Review that so that you're only providing the constructive part of that. Not that you changed your hair color or I don't like the people you're hanging out with. That doesn't impact the performance. And then provide it in a constructive manner. And what this will also tell you is, I'm not going to stand here and tell Catherine how bad she is in front of 25 students. There's no place for that. That's a one-on-one individual feedback is better received in an individual setting with a professional approach that I've reviewed it to make sure that I'm objective and that I was prepared in that feedback session. So if you treat that session that you're going to have that intervention, that discussion, as an assignment, as homework, as a test of your ability, you're going to prepare for that. That's a given for a Purdue graduate, especially out of the engineering program. Okay, so a couple things on each one of those. Your own observations, not those of others. Use your experience and expertise to assess what the behavior is. Does it make sense for what you're trying to provide feedback on? Is the approach that that person's taken completely wrong, and is that what you have to go after? Or are their math skills so bad that you need to give them developmental help there? Size it up based on your experience and what you've done over your time. Withhold your judgment until there's facts. Specific examples are obviously better than just that, well, generally you come late. Provide the examples. Take the time to document that, get it ready, so that not that there's no argument or debate. Debate is sometimes healthy, but you have the documentation rather than generalities that, because people don't want to hear it, they'll find a way to squirm away, slide out, or change the subject on you. And then provide that feedback, that criticism to the individual yourself. And that's another difficult time, because a lot of times I know in our careers we end up saying, you know what, I got Billy over here. Billy's a great person. People love him in my department, and I've got 100 engineers that work for him. It's easier to let him do it. But that's not the way it's going to be effective, because I'm the one that observed it. I'm the one that has to deal with that. I'm the one that's responsible for moving the enterprise. So accept it as part of your job, as part of your assignment of being a leader in whatever group, project, or company you're in. Make sure before you provide it, you've reviewed it and you've tested your assumptions that you have in there so that you're not being subjective based on something that has no impact on what the problem is. Be clear about it. Assess what you're going to say when you meet with the individual ahead of time. Then you arrange the meeting to meet with them. You take that initiative. I need to set up a time with you, Catherine. We need to talk about this particular issue. That gives her a chance to at least acknowledge that she can go do some things about what that subject is on her looking in the mirror, on her review of her progress, her notes, the other team members, and then meet with the recipient privately. You don't criticize people. If you're a professional and you're good at what you do not criticize people in public. Now, take that away from the politics of this company, as that's a whole different world. This is in a professional setting, whether you're in a private industry, a public industry, whether you're in the service community, or any OEMs out there at all. Deal with that on a professional manner and take time to make that into an individual setting. And then how do you provide that? Remembering that your project team's going to be the project team tomorrow. As a leader, you should have something positive that everybody on your team has done at some point. Start with the positive. I think everybody likes to be told they did a good job. So start with something positive to get it off into the right, here's what we're going to talk about. You know, I like the fact that you've been at every session, every project plan, every design review. I like the fact that you've been there and your contribution on this particular item was very good. So start with a positive and then talk about the specific behavior that you want to address. That this is what now we need to talk about. This particular behavior from your actions. You can recreate it because you've had your notes, you've prepared them. You can use quotes if you've got them from other people that contribute to that. Calm and constructive, clearly. Make it professional. You're going to keep your emotions like anger or frustration out of it. Be candid, but be calm and constructive while you're doing it. And then at the end, make it positive that you have had this conversation. And as I've always said, you can do with it what you want with this feedback. I expect you as your leader to go to work on it and come back here in a couple of weeks and show me that you care, that you've done something about it, that the team is now going to be less reliant on the rest of them and they can count on you to deliver. So you kind of end it with in the situation, but end it with positive, but also end it with we're going to follow up on this to make sure. Not that, okay, I got that done, let's go have a beer. Right? That's okay if you want to do that, but make sure you have it as a leader that you really want that to continue moving towards that curve. So basically, that's your feedback manner, how you actually do the feedback after you've reviewed it, after you've prepared it, and set the time up with the particular individual. And again, you cannot emphasize enough that because it's a rare deal to get candid, constructive criticism throughout your journey, it's a gift. Treat it as a gift. Be open to receiving it, right? If your leader comes in and says, hey, Jennifer, I'm telling you, you're just not getting it done. We go through all this, and then Jennifer's response is, well, I don't like you either. You haven't really gotten through. And again, the whole team's going to come back and play together tomorrow. So from a sports analogy, you can't have the quarterback just tearing his offensive line apart, saying you guys don't block, you're worthless, you don't care. What are they going to do? If you just repeat that, repeat that, and repeat that, step aside, let him get sacked time after time again. You've got to have that trust that you're all working on the same good or the same mission. So if you view it as a gift and be open to receiving it, you make that whole team better because then you learn how to provide that to others. And at times, peer-to-peer feedback is just as important as long as it's constructive and professional, that team that you're going to sit with today is who you're going to sit with tomorrow and continue on with the project. Because you don't need to alienate anymore. As every operation gets more efficient and you start leaning out waste and waste and waste, you're going to be doing more with less. So you really need everybody's part of that teamwork, part of their project assignment to be completed in a very efficient and productive manner. And then you're positive going forward, that you would not hesitate to say, I want that same group on my team the next time. So if you view it as a gift, I think there's 3 simple items there that you can follow through with. If you prepare it, you review it, and then you provide it give me a positive so I can at least trust that you know I'm doing something right, and then deal with the specifics, deal with the developmental part of it, and then end it with either a follow-up or a positive item, and then continue to show that you do have that I care message for everybody on the team. I think you're going to be a little more useful as a leadership person or leader in anything you're involved in on campus or off campus or in your career. That's that. Questions, comments, feedback? Who has the first question? How do you make it fun? Say that again?
How long are you waiting to make the feedback fun at the end?
How long do you wait to make the feedback?
How long were you waiting to make the fun at the end that you just did?
Oh, the pun at the end.
This is a language barrier, you know?
I would say that that probably happened in the first year. So for asking the first question, you can have a Volt or a Camaro.
Can I have both?
The Camaro's a USB.
All right.
Who's got the next question? Yes, sir.
What would you recommend to do when you have feedback that isn't constructive at all? Like it's just pure frustration. What would you recommend being the first steps to turning that around?
You're giving it or you're receiving it? If you're receiving feedback that you feel is not constructive in that case, right, I would accept the time that the person wants to vent because they obviously need to vent, but then set up another time for you to be able to say, we need to talk about this particular session because you're smarter now, you've been educated on how to provide that feedback and what it should be, and then that's where that leader needs to also accept that 360-degree feedback from the people that he's given it to, that you just can't give it and run. You've got to accept the fact that you might not be a very good person from a leadership feedback standpoint, and you need to have that. Now that, some people say that's really risky to go and tell your leader that you didn't appreciate the way they provided feedback, but the fact is the problem that they tried to address, were there specifics, or was it all about how I hate purple and how the fact that you're running with the wrong group gets into the fact that you can't solve this differential equation? It's what didn't I do right that you want to talk to me about. You just have to go back and reverse it and say, I appreciate a follow-up session. So rather than wait for them to say, I'm going to follow up in a couple of weeks, you say, I'd like to have a follow-up. And then attitudes change, anger changes, they vented that out, so the chances are high that they won't have that frustration the next time. They'll have a little bit, just because they might not be a kind of person that likes that personal, individual, let's talk about your issue, and maybe they're worried about themselves. So I would always just encourage them to come back to me and say, if you didn't like that, let's talk about the parts that I failed at so I can get better at it, because we all can get better, and then set that up by you asking for that session. USB? Nobody's an EV fan. Who's got the next question? There's got to be more questions. Comments?
I have a question. How do you address, like, in a peer feedback situation? It's a little different, so it isn't, like, necessarily, like, and, like, I guess in my corporate experience,
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The peer-to-peer feedback is sometimes, to me, it's been based on, do you have a good working relationship with that peer? And is there a mutual interest in that group? In manufacturing, there's always a mutual interest in that we're all part of the same enterprise and we all have to get higher quality, higher throughput. You're going to take the EV.
Yeah.
Okay.
After you said.
So the peer-to-peer, what I've tended to do, and I'll tell you, the 360 program that we went to makes it a little bit easier because you get it constructively in the survey form as to all the characteristics that you do well, that you really want help on, or they really want to give you help on, that you can then form your own, hey, let's sit down as a peer group and talk about this. So in my world, I've got 5 peers basically at this level. So we have, over the years, sat down as a group and just talked about each individual's, that, hey, we all seem to be providing feedback that we're not spending enough time with each other, that we're either spending too much time with our leaders or out of the facilities, or we're spending too much time on particular problems in our areas and not looking at the whole enterprise. And that was very advantageous because we had seen that across, at least 3 of us had seen that in our results and said, let's talk about that particular item. So we had time to prepare. We had the specific information that it was objective. It was truly there based on what we had heard. But there has to be that mutual trust and mutual acceptance because, again, you'll run into people that say, I don't need to talk to you. I got to worry about what my boss says.